Mr. Colin Ninville, lecturer, University of Guyana. Colin, recently you were at the center of a controversy at the university. Would you care to give a background to the whole issue, the entire situation leading up to this?
Well, when I came to the University of Guyana in September 1994, I quickly assessed the situation there and decided that in order to be effective as a teacher, I had to introduce a concept. It's a concept in teaching and learning that's called experiential learning. It was Dr. Baker, who is Jim Baker, who is an expert on the topic, on the subject matter, writes me regularly.
Which university?
He is at York University. And I decided to introduce the concept because I felt really it was the kind of concept I needed for the Guyanese student for reasons which I'd like to go into. What I found with the Guyanese students, a very, very intelligent crowd, but yet still I felt that there was a lack of critical thinking skills. When I say critical, I mean the ability to think about multiple things at the same time and analyze and come up with a decision. That's the kind of thinking that we need to take us into the 21st century. That's the kind of thinking I was trained in, and that's why the kind of thinking that I excelled in. Now, in order to encourage that, I realized too really that I had to use a certain technique called experiential learning. Now, let me tell you what it is really, in effect. Experiential learning is like, for instance, if you want to learn about Cuba, not only would you read about it, you would actually go to visit the place. Now, that's the most basic idea of experiential learning. But there's a more sophisticated level of it, which is what I introduced. And this really is, whenever you want to teach a student something, you actually take them through certain paces so that they can recognize the kind of parallels that you were trying to introduce. Let me give you an example. Last year, I wanted them to do a critique on Edgar Mitterholzer's novel, Children of Kaiwana. Now, I find Mitterholzer very intriguing in this sense. He has a way of writing that he would be talking about something and all of a sudden, almost imperceptibly, you find yourself in another scenery, and it goes on like that. In other words, he tends to take you through different realities almost in the same breath. And as an exercise to challenge the topic, right, and the analysis, one day I walked into a lecture and I said, let's go for a walk. Everybody, and then I set everything right into the squatting area. There is 275 students following me in the squatting area. Because I want to show them really that you have to deal really with suddenness. All of a sudden I said, let's go for a walk. Now how are you going to reorganize your thinking? This is unusual, but then again, so what? We were able to carry off that exercise, and I explained a lot of things out of that exercise to them. One of the things being too really is that, imagine I would walk into a lecture hall and tell you to follow me to go for a walk, and you would just do it. There's a guy called Milgram, he wrote a paper on that in psychology, the authoritarian ideology, of how people can obey commands just like that, just because I'm the teacher. I said, why did you just follow me like that? You never resisted. In other words, I was challenging them at different levels in terms of their thinking. I said, here's a squat near, that's a door right next to you. You've never really gone and visited them. Do you ever wonder what's going on? There were so many things that came out. When these students did that exercise on Mitterholzer, I had tears in my eyes when I saw how they had excelled in it. I am telling you, right, I had never seen such a wonderful experience, 262 of them. Now, that was last year. So this year I decided to set it up in a different way. Because one of the things I was concerned about in the student in terms of Guyanese society is because they never felt really that they can change things around them. Everybody seemed to be telling me, well, that's the way things are, we have to accept it, da. And I'm saying, the university I came from, really, I was nurtured always to resist, to protest when you see something wrong. I was pampered as a student. I went to one of the top universities in the world in terms of sociology. And I was nurtured in a very careful way. And I was always an understanding student. I was pampered. I was taught that whenever you see something wrong, you call it that, and you try to do something about it. So I said, what am I going to do to make sure to motivate them to agitate more? So we were doing a course on the history of theory and dealing, of course, with Plato. who was one of the foremost world's philosophers. And I decided to introduce to them the concept of limits. Now, the concept of limits is a very intriguing concept because it implies moral, justice. What are your moral limits? How far are you going to go to make change? And I kept talking about it and pounding it into their heads, really. I said, let's talk about this concept. And when we had reached a certain point, I said, it's time to act it out too. I told them very carefully, I said, no more late papers, right? I told students time, this thing was set since April 6th to be brought in. I gave them a lot of time to do it. I said, I'm not going to compromise this time like I did before. I want to see every single paper in here in this class. 90 students responded positively. I was teaching a class of 120 people. There's about 13 of them that didn't bring in assignments at all. So you're looking at 107. 17 brought their in late. 90 of them brought their ones on time. People are not talking about those 90 because they're the ones that obeyed. The ones that didn't really, of course, I was prepared for them because I said this also, I believe. I said, if you bring it in late, I'm going to discard it. I have a habit of tearing things up before I discard it, to tell the truth. But I knew really that I was going to test myself. And I want to mention something else to the public, really, that only the students know and a few other people. I resigned before the exercise because I want to gain strength to hold my stance. I said, I know what I'm going to do, and I'm going to put my career on the line. I sent in my resignation because I knew right there and there I wasn't going to compromise. I was going to tell the student that you have to do it right this way or else don't do it at all. So when the hullabaloo started, really, and the student, I told the student, like, I didn't tell him in a harsh way, really, but I said, you know, I tore up the paper. He got mad and walked out, and then I knew it was going to start. He came back the next day with a letter, and he moved so swiftly. I said, that is good. I checked the letter for spelling errors and things like that. I mean, they were attacking me in the letter, but I was looking at the letter. I said, that's a very good letter that they wrote. I was a bit concerned about some of the signatures. I thought it could be a bit, but I said, well, they don't want me to know it's them. They brought another one to me. There was more signature. I said, this is good. I was looking at their maneuvers. Meanwhile, of course, the administration is sleeping. This thing happened since about the 7th of March. This about 19 days later. Up to this day, the administration still hasn't called me in for a hearing. The course was removed from me over the TV, and you know, somebody had to tell me and things like that. And to me, like, I can't understand that. Like, to me, I can't understand why the administration is behaving like that because it's not just. But that's another matter.
Colin,
Yeah.
there was an occasion, however, you weren't always destroying papers. There was an occasion where you took an unusual position to the positive that nobody is mentioning. Talk about that.
Right. I've never done that. As a matter of fact, students will tell you real that sometimes I've sat up there and they couldn't believe it when I told them, I have a button here that says no. But when I say yes and no, I usually mean it. You know, I told them, I said, because before I would sit up till midnight collecting papers, and of course by the time I'm going to the gate after midnight, there's still a student riding a motorbike bringing a paper late. I've gone through that time and again. I said, I want it to be perfect this time, a perfect score. And I'm going to put my career on the line to get it. Now, coming back to the students, really, I saw the maneuvers. I heard that they were planning a protest. And I said, this is incredible, really, what they're doing, because they're really going for it, okay? When I heard this roar last Wednesday, I knew that these people really meant business. And I said, I have never seen these students act so positively and with so much energy. I was in a classroom conducting when there was a big thing at UG. I was still carrying on my tutorials. I was meeting students and everything. I was shaking in my boots, by the way. You know, not one of those students came into my office to disrupt it. Not one of them came in there. And people that believe that students pulled me out of the minibus, it never happened that way. They invited me for a mock trial. I was treated with the greatest amount of respect. Up to this day, not one single student has as much as touched the sleeve on my shirt. Because I told them when they went into the mock trial, I said, that was one bad maneuvering that they did, I felt, because they held the trial in my classroom, and I ended up teaching them. So what I'm saying really is that I say congratulations to the student. It's been a very, very successful campaign. And what I'm saying really, that's the essence of experiential learning. Because they have indicated clearly really that they had reached their moral limits in terms. You know, I was around at UG on the Sunday, gone there, and Everybody was cleaning up the washroom. Everybody was in this bustle. And I'm saying, look at the energy, because they say we want it done by Monday. There's a few things that concern me in terms of their demands. One of the things they need to put on the table is the semester system. The semester system, especially for first-year students, is a pressure cooker. I believe when students come in for the first time, you need to relax them a bit instead of throwing the semester, maybe for the higher courses, but give them a break, and I believe they should stretch it out. Sexual harassment is something that has come, but I think it's a very serious issue. The university I went to, it was one of the first to introduce the concept. And they have actually a center for it now, right? And I believe those are things that they should have set up there. I believe that the curriculum itself that needs to be addressed really in terms of the amount of courses they take to graduate. Again, like I have always excelled in my discipline, but I took much less courses. It's too much really. They should start fighting for things like that. Less courses and make the courses more qualitative in terms of, UG has a certain logic that you take 50 courses, and it doesn't matter if you can't go into depth with each of them, but just to say, well, you have to, but that's a lot of nonsense. I believe they have to take less and make it more in depth. Things like that, I believe they have to put on the table.
Tell me about the time when you gave an entire class full marks because they had blackouts.
Well, those are one of the frustrations that I was experiencing in the system, really, because I would set an exam, and there would be a blackout on one day. So the students are all waiting there. The next day, there's a blackout. And I prepared in my mind again. I said, the next time it happens, I'm going to give the whole class full marks. So, of course, the next time it happened, I walked in. And again, I'm always careful this way to tell them, I said, this is why I'm doing it. And I said, you've passed a very great test of patience by putting up with the system this way. Have full marks. And I must say, really, that I'm thankful for my faculty that it allowed me to get away with it, because nobody questioned me about it. Now, and you know, I don't like to talk about these things, but I'm saying really that that's part of my role as a teacher. Because when I evaluate a student, it's not only of how much they put on that paper really, but in terms of what sacrifice they make in other words, I do a wide kind of comprehensive calculation in terms of UG student, because it's such a unique kind of experience. And I would like to add here, while I'm here really, just to establish something clearly. I got my master's degree from York University in Canada. And it was a very outstanding event, because I wrote, in effect, the perfect master's thesis. It's never been done before. I got a scholarship to go to the PhD department, the PhD department. And after a year, I withdrew because I felt really that I would grow in my teachers, and I wanted to come to Guyana. So I'm a master of the pen, but also the sword. While going to university, I became involved in karate, Wadoka Academy. And I want to highlight some of my accomplishments. I was voted the most valuable player in 1979 in the inter-university championship in Oswego, New York. I was chosen the only person in the province of Ontario to represent Canada in a 5-man team in Tokyo, Japan in 1984. In 1990, I won the prestigious Kubota Cup. It's one of the most prestigious karate tournaments in North America. And of course, I got, when you have to win the Kubota Cup, you have to have first place, because it's actually a goblet.
Okay.
And it's one of the most coveted prizes there is.
Okay.
So, and I've been, of course, training for 17 years. I got my second degree in 1993. Okay. My teacher is outside of Japan. He is the best there is. So I'm a master of the pen and the sword. And this is the kind of discipline, really, that I expose to the students. I have never, ever been late for a paper. I can't understand. I learned to type when I was an undergraduate. Okay. The university that I goes to, Ben Johnson, the famous Canadian runner, used to train at York Track and Field. They want to hold the Olympics. It has state-of-the-art facilities. We have a shopping mall at York. I used to go to visit my dentist in between classes there. We have a cinema, right? You have to see it to believe it. I would get access to the library from my apartment through the computer and picking books. The library is 5 floors up, and that's only one of them.
Okay.
So I'm saying really that I'm accustomed really to have access to very rich facilities. But when I came here really, I immediately adapted, because I'm a good sociologist. I never complained. I would be in that library in July to plan my course for September. running behind the librarians, trying to get things right so that when that student walked into that class the first day, they had all the course outline in their hand, they had everything, bang, we went right away. 275 students, I would mark them their papers on the Wednesday, they would have feedback by Monday. I would work the entire weekend to get those papers ready because I believe in giving students immediate feedback because I know that they like that. You know these things what I'm telling you about? These are the things that I really don't like to mention, but I feel it's necessary to mention. In other words, as far as I'm concerned, my performance has been impeccable. I have office hours that say 12 to 1 on Mondays and Wednesdays. And you better believe it. It has never happened that when they come there, I'm not there with the door open. Bang on at 12, because of course I'm always there by 10 or 11. You know what I mean?
Now, from what you say, obviously, and from what others have told me, your departure from the university represents a loss. But what about your future? What do you plan to do?
Well, I'm been very idle recently because I've been resting a lot and reflecting upon a lot of matters really that I want to deal with. And it feels to me now this is the perfect time to launch my book, the book that I wrote soon after I finished my master's thesis. I want to mention a few things with it because I'm really talking to the Guyanese public now. The book really is about there's one important question in life. It's the question of all questions, right? It's really how the world began. And there is three major theories that purports to address that issue. One of them says that we come from animals. One of them said there's the Big Bang Theory. One of them says, well, God created the world. Let me deal with the first one, because in essence, I dealt with it in the book in a very interesting way. We couldn't have come from animals because it's impossible for a human being to reproduce with an animal. So by that logic, how could you come from an animal when you can't reproduce with it? Okay. In terms of the Big Bang Theory, really, who heard the Big Bang? I mean, let me give you what I used to introduce to the students a lot, which is the concept of a syllogism, right? You couldn't have heard the Big Bang because the world would have had to create it before. Now, you were created after. So, how did you hear it? You have to figure out that logic. And this one here, really, I have to brace myself for this one. Because if anybody ever tells me that God created this world, I would say that's a lie. And not only that, I would say that that's blasphemy. Because, and that's the part that because is in the book. And they'll have to wait to hear my explanation about that. I am absolutely thrilled about the opportunity to do it now because the timing is perfect. Because now, you see, you called me a university lecturer, really. And I would like to tell you, really, that since the incident, I've already thrown away that cap. I am now an author. I am not a university lecturer anymore because the student managed to kick me out of that spot. I couldn't have done it better, really, and I'm well trained with this stuff. And they were telling me, well, listen, we have had enough of you, really. And to tell the truth, really, I believe enough is enough, and I feel the same way about them. I believe that it's time for us to come together more at a different level of influence. More like equals, talk to them on the job, give them advice about this, let them give me advice about things. I believe that we've had enough, really, of that pressure cooker, both of us, really. It's time for a change. It's time for me to go. It's time for them to see me in an entirely different light. And I'm going to look forward so much to that.
If the university recalls you, what are likely to be options?
Now, I'll tell you something, really, having said that. There is one, human part of me that still wants to be there. But to tell the truth, really, I just want to be out of UG, really. I believe I've had enough, because the other thing I have to tell you, in terms of experiential learning, I don't know. In fact, I believe that my academic career might be over because I don't know if I could motivate another bunch of students to accomplish what they did. I don't know if I can pull off something like that ever again. And I want this to remain in my memory to tell my grandchildren about. It's like,
Okay. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you very much, too. All right. And God bless everybody out there.